right.
Better luck next time.
This doesn't happen to people like me. You leave me no choice.
I'm sorry, but rules are rules, even for prime ministers. What on earth is that?
My mutant pet.
Dominic Cummings?
No. Big algorithm. Get it?
Global higher education with one of the world's best-known iconoclasts. The mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Caleb Maupin, as you know, is my favorite commentator in America. He's based in New York City. We'll be talking to someone else from New York, too, about specifically New York issues. Caleb is my go-to on the American political scenes. He is my colleague at RT, but he's also a writer and a political activist and a power on social media. Follow him if you're not already. Caleb, welcome back to the show. These are very grim times. Just lay my cards on the table. While I want to see the end of the American empire, because I want to see the end of all empires, I don't want to see your country tearing itself apart. I don't want to see blood running down your streets. But as I look at things today, that's what I'm now fearing. Where do you stand?
Indeed. We just had another shooting last night. A Trump supporter was shot in the streets of Portland. And that comes on the aftermath of just a few nights ago in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as people gathered to protest yet another police murder. Then a young person, someone under the age of 18, showed up and opened fire, killed two of the anti-police brutality protesters, shot others. So this is a situation that has many worried about the future of the country. People are comparing it to possibly the years of lead in Italy, where we saw far right-wing and far left-wing groups in the streets killing each other, shooting each other. And what's interesting about that period in Italian history was we now know about Operation Gladio and how the CIA was involved in that. And it seems like we're in a situation where it's not just the population here in the United States that is polarized, but it's the government apparatus itself. There's a big call from the Democrats now to defund the local police, defund the cops. The local police, not surprisingly, are much more supportive of Donald Trump. Meanwhile, many within the intelligence apparatus, intelligence officials and such, are rallying behind Joe Biden, wanting to defeat Donald Trump because they think Donald Trump is a threat to the U.S. foreign policy apparatus and status quo. And it seems like not only is the population divided, but the state apparatus, the military, the policing agencies, the intelligence apparatus is also divided. The United States is polarizing very quickly.
It is uncharted. These are uncharted waters. A man of your age has not seen anything like this in the United States. A man of my age even has never seen anything like this. There have been riots before, of course. There have been substantial riots. I remember in the 1960s in Watts, for example, very, very substantial riots. But this is all across the country. It transcends color, though color is a significant part of it. Many of the, I suppose we could call them left-wing rioters, certainly anti-Trump rioters, are not black. In fact, to me, it looks in the pictures I see disproportionately white. The apparatus being split, the political class being split, these are all quite unprecedented factors for me. And it's very hard to see where it ends. It seems to be accelerating, Caleb.
Indeed, and probably the biggest factor driving it forward is economic. unemployment is through the roof. People are losing their homes. Evictions are rising. This pandemic has just decimated the U.S. economy. It has just destroyed it. Trump was boasting just a few months ago about how the United States had the greatest economy in all of its history ever. Well, that all came crashing down very, very, very quickly. And now many people are scrambling to pay their bills. Here in New York City, outside of the office of the Catholic Charities in Queens, there are big lines almost every day of working class people who are worried about how they're going to eat and feed their kids, and they are suffering. And I think that this unemployment, this problem spawned by the pandemic, spawned by some of our deeper problems in U.S. society, like the elimination of good-paying industrial jobs, like the rise of what I would call a low-wage police state. All of this has culminated in an economic crisis that is leading to instability on the streets. The country is politically polarized. People are not seeing eye to eye. And the two major parties seem to be at odds about how to resolve it. We just had the major conventions. Democrats emphasize that they are fighting to preserve the status quo, that Donald Trump is a radical and he's making everything crazy and inciting Americans against each other. They're going to make things the good old America like the way they used to be before Trump's radicalism. Donald Trump, on the other hand, just had a very, very successful convention that gave him a little bit of a boost in the polls because he said he's fighting for the quote-unquote silent majority. He pulled a card from Richard Nixon and basically is arguing that that he's the law and order candidate. He's going to bring stability. He's fighting for average Americans who are left out and ignored against these elites that want violence and chaos in the streets. It seems like right-wing populism from Donald Trump and a defense of the status quo that is very, very strong and loud from the Biden camp. That's the choice Americans are going to have in November, neither of which really address the underlying economic problem.
Michael Moore said that the 60 million Trumpers are a frenzied pitch of readiness. The supporters of Joe, not so much. That seemed to me a shrewd observation, and perhaps, like a cloud no bigger than a man's hand, could be a harbinger of something big to come.
Well, Michael Moore called it in 2016. All the polls in 2016 seemed to indicate that Donald Trump would lose and Hillary Clinton would be victorious. But Michael Moore, ahead of the election, he said, look, he said the white working class that have been left behind economically, that are angry at Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party status quo, are going to turn out in big numbers. He referred to Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio as the quote-unquote Brexit states, and he predicted Trump's victory. And he was right, and people didn't see that in the polls. And right now, sure, the polls look pretty good for Joe Biden, but but Michael Moore is predicting a similar turnout, a similar situation. The thing is, in the Biden camp, you just don't have enthusiasm. People just don't get excited about Joe Biden. His speech closing out his convention was very much a conciliatory speech. People were actually reminded of the malaise speech of the late Jimmy Carter and his remarks about how he, during the economic crisis, he was going to bring everyone together. He cared. It's a conciliatory tone. It's kind of a pessimistic, dark tone. It's not exactly the tone that gets people fired up and excited. The United States is a country very much associated with optimism and hope and the American dream and going out and working hard. And Donald Trump has tapped into that American enthusiasm. Whereas the tone coming from the Democratic Party is let's calm down, let's stabilize things, let's listen to both sides, let's negotiate. And in a time when people are suffering and upset, it seems like that angry tone coming from the Republicans might win out.
The swing state polls have narrowed quite considerably. And in one of them, Michigan, as it happens, the latest one has Trump ahead for the first time since this crisis enveloped your country. It's obvious to me, it was obvious before it got underway, that widespread unrest in the country, law-breaking, looting, and so on, was going to help Trump and harm the Democrats. But the Democrats are incapable of bringing that under control, aren't they? Because these people, whatever definition you would give them, they're not hanging on Joe Biden's every word.
Indeed, there is a rank and file of the Democratic Party, people that were supportive of Bernie Sanders, people that are angry about issues like lack of health care, people who are upset about police brutality and systemic racism, that are out in the streets. And probably one of the primary reasons that they are filling the streets right now is they don't really have an electoral expression. There's really no way to vote for what they want at the polls. Joe Biden is very much associated with lock 'em up, tough on crime bills, and so is Kamala Harris, his running mate. Kamala Harris was a prosecutor in California. She rose up the ranks in California's prosecutorial apparatus at a time when the prison population was rising and rising and rising. She is associated with trying her hardest to keep people on death row, locking people up for smoking marijuana, when then she jokes about the fact that she herself is also a pot smoker. People on the Democratic camp don't feel excited about their candidate, and many of them are feeling like the only way they can express themselves and give voice to their agenda is to be in the streets. And that seems to be driving a lot of the anger behind the protests. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, like I said, pulling a page from Richard Nixon and trying to say he's going to calm things down. He's going to be tough on the commies and the radicals that are in the streets breaking things. He's the strong man fighting for middle America against the chaos and the extremism of the far left. Donald Trump is running against Joe Biden as if Joe Biden is a communist. He's calling him a Trojan horse for the far left, when everyone knows that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are about as centrist and mild as you can get. And the rank and file of the Democratic Party knows that. And a lot of them just don't have enthusiasm for their campaign.
Never was there a time more designed almost for a Bobby Kennedy or for an early Bernie Sanders. But that just fell away, didn't it? There was no chance in the primary season for such a candidate to emerge.
Indeed, the Democratic Party, which is the party of urban political machines. You can go back to the Chicago machine, the Philadelphia machine, the Tammany Hall machine here in New York City. The Democratic Party is very much a party associated with urban political machines and corruption. And in the Democratic Party, people wait their turn. Now, it's not who gets the support of the rank and file. It's not who's the best and most charismatic politician. It's who has waited out and waited their turn in the pecking order of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is associated with a lot of the corruption of bureaucracy in urban centers of the United States. And because of that, it's not really able to give the average person who would vote for the Democratic Party what they really want. Meanwhile, the Republicans are a party of fanatics. They're a party of right-wing fanatics, religious fanatics, militarist hawks, and others. However, people believe them when they talk. The passion that they have is genuine. They believe what they're saying. Many people may not agree with them, but people take them more at their word. And this is the weird contradiction of politics in our time. But we should be very, very concerned because gun sales in the United States have risen by 72%. And we're seeing these shootings, these political shootings, people killing each other at political rallies. I mean, the country is destabilizing very, very quickly. And whoever wins the election in November is going to have the task of trying to bring the United States back to stability and back to civil order, because the country is destabilizing and spinning out of control very, very quickly.
Now, the new third party, People's Party, I think it's called, forming up this weekend. Have you had a chance to run your eye over that?
Well, that's a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters who had planned to have an alternative convention to the Democratic convention. They plan to have a people's convention. Now, with the pandemic, we're not really having conventions. And so, but yes, the movement for a people's party has been in the works. Many voices of people that were prominent in the Bernie Sanders movement are pushing that. And it's very likely that if Joe Biden is not victorious in November, that these two viewpoints within the Democratic Party will part ways. So there's one viewpoint that wants to go in a more social democratic, Bernie Sanders' direction. There's another wing that wants to go in a more mainstream direction and maybe even team up with the neocons that are backing Joe Biden right now, such as John Bolton and others, such as George W. Bush, who's also backing Biden. There are two ways forward for the Democratic Party, and it seems that if Joe Biden is not victorious, it's very likely that the Democratic Party will part ways, that there will be a division. But let's be real. There's also a deep division within the Trump camp and the Republican camp as well. There's a lot of neocons in the Trump camp who are very unhappy with the Steve Bannon element and with the populism of the Trump movement. We saw Rand Paul, who gave a speech at the Republican convention hailing Trump as a non-interventionist. Meanwhile, we had Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, violating the norms of U.S. politics, speaking from Jerusalem to address the Republican National Convention and hailing Trump as going after Iran and going after China. There are deep divisions within the Republican camp as well. It seems that from the right and from the left, Americans are tired of the status quo. The status quo being, unregulated free market policies, the deregulation of the economy, globalism, military interventions around the world. A lot of people in the United States are just unhappy with this status quo where the United States seems to be run by global multinational corporations. Now, from the right, that translates into economic nationalism. From the left, that translates into democratic socialism. But in both camps, there is distrust and unsatisfaction with the way the United States is moving.
A tour de force as always. Caleb Maupin, thanks for joining us here on the mother of all talk shows. Much appreciated.